Part 1. The Great Reversal. From pacifism to rearmament, welcome back to Omni Power. For decades, the global order relied on a specific understanding of Europe. The United States provided the ultimate security umbrella. France offered the strategic geopolitical voice. And Germany? Well, Germany built the cars, the machinery, and focused on economic prosperity while maintaining a deeply ingrained cultural and political pacifism. For over half a century, the idea of a heavily armed, aggressive Germany was an absolute taboo, both inside the country and across the capitals of Europe. The scars of the 20th century were too deep, the constitutional constraints too rigid, and the pacifist sentiment among the German public too resolute. Yet, as we navigate through 2026, we are witnessing one of the most profound and historic paradigm shifts of our time. The Great Reversal is complete. The silent industrial machine has awakened, and it is transforming into Europe's premier military powerhouse. The defining paradox of modern Europe is staring us right in the face. A nation that once fiercely feared militarization, a society that protested against nuclear weapons and military intervention, is now actively pouring hundreds of billions of euros into weapons, ammunition, and defense technology. Consider the sheer scale of this transformation. Not long ago, Germany was frequently criticized by its NATO allies for being a security free rider, failing to meet the alliance's minimum defense spending thresholds. But today, under a drastically altered geopolitical landscape, Berlin has undergone what Chancellor Olaf Scholz famously termed the Zeitenwende, an epochal shift in security policy. Germany's military budget has soared, consistently obliterating historical ceilings and pushing past the crucial 2% GDP threshold, with plans projecting defense budgets exceeding 150 billion euros annually by the late 2020s. To put this into perspective, Germany has transformed into the largest single military spender in Central and Western Europe, constructing the strongest conventional army the continent has seen since the end of the Second World War. What caused this monumental 180-degree pivot? The answer lies in the harsh realities of the post-2022 European security environment, which shattered decades of diplomatic illusions. For nearly 35 years, Germany and much of Western Europe relied on the unshakable assumption that the Cold War was dead. Major state-on-state conflict in Europe was unthinkable, and peace was the default state of existence. But the Russian invasion of Ukraine abruptly ended that era of complacency. The sudden return of high-intensity, conventional warfare to the European continent forced a rapid awakening in Berlin. Suddenly, the geographical distance separating Germany from the front lines of instability felt dangerously small. Policymakers in Berlin realized, with terrifying clarity, that if the eastern flank of NATO were to fall, Germany's own borders would be directly exposed to an aggressive, revanchist power. The traditional German doctrine of Wandel durch Handel, change through trade, was left in ruins. Engaging diplomatically and economically with autocratic regimes was no longer a guarantee of peace. It had morphed into a dangerous vulnerability. Furthermore, shifting political winds and changing administrations in Washington introduced a profound element of uncertainty regarding the reliability of the United States security guarantee. For the better part of a century, Europe outsourced its ultimate defense to the Pentagon. But with American political priorities increasingly pivoting towards the Indo-Pacific and rising domestic isolationism, the realization struck home that Europe must, for the first time since 1945, take primary responsibility for its own continental defense. This was not merely an adjustment in budgetary figures. It was an existential, psychological transformation. A nation that had equated military strength with historical guilt now views military preparedness as the only reliable deterrent against the destruction of its democratic values and sovereignty. Part 2. The Euro and the Engine. How Germany quietly ruled Europe while Germany's military awakening is the newest chapter in its modern history. To truly understand its power, we must look at how Berlin has dominated Europe for the past 2 decades. For years, observers often wondered, if Germany was so hesitant to use hard military power, How did it manage to become the undisputed, dominant hegemon of the European continent? The answer is found in the machinery of the European Union, the design of the euro, and unparalleled German engineering. When the euro was introduced, it fundamentally altered the economic dynamics of Europe. Prior to the single currency, countries like Italy, Spain, and Greece utilized their own currencies, which could be devalued to maintain export competitiveness when their economies lagged. However, the adoption of the euro locked all these diverse economies into a single monetary framework. Because the euro encompasses both hyperproductive, export-driven economies like Germany and structurally different economies in Southern Europe, it created a structural imbalance. The euro is, in many ways, too weak for Germany's economic capacity, but it is too strong for the peripheral nations. This meant that German goods, renowned globally for their quality and precision, became artificially competitive and relatively cheap, while Southern European nations struggled to compete against the industrial juggernaut. This monetary dynamic, combined with strict fiscal rules and the establishment of a European Central Bank, placed Berlin in the driver's seat. Germany effectively became the paymaster and the rule-maker of the Eurozone. Whenever financial crises hit the continent, it was Berlin that dictated the terms of the bailouts, imposing strict austerity measures in exchange for financial lifelines. This economic philosophy was not driven purely by malice, but by a deeply ingrained German commitment to Schwarz Null, the balanced budget, or zero-deficit policy. By exporting its fiscal conservatism to the rest of Europe, Germany transformed the European Union into an economic reflection of itself. But the real secret to Germany's European hegemony lies in its industrial prowess, particularly in the automotive and mechanical engineering sectors. Made in Germany is more than just a marketing slogan. It is the lifeblood of the European economy. Companies like Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Audi are not just corporations. They are foundational pillars of global economic power. The automotive sector alone contributes significantly to Germany's total GDP, and together with heavy machinery and chemicals, it makes up a vast portion of the nation's economic output. Think about the interconnected supply chains that power Europe. When you look at a German luxury vehicle, it is not simply made in a factory in Munich or Stuttgart. It is the culmination of a massive pan-European supply chain. Highly specialized components, electronics, and engine parts are manufactured in the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, and Hungary, then shipped to Germany for final assembly, testing, and distribution across the globe. This spatial division of labor has effectively integrated the economies of Central and Eastern Europe into a German-led economic empire. While Germany provides the capital, the technology, and the global brand prestige, Eastern and Central Europe provide the vital manufacturing base and highly skilled, cost-effective labor. This model worked flawlessly during the decades of globalization and hypergrowth. Germany achieved massive trade surpluses, amassing incredible wealth and cementing its status as one of the world's premier exporting nations. This economic dominance is exactly why Germany rules Europe without needing a massive standing army. Through the euro, through the European single market, and through its deeply embedded corporate supply chains, Berlin exerts far more influence over the economic policies, labor laws, and industrial regulations of European nations than any traditional military conqueror could ever achieve. However, this economic model is not immune to global pressures. As we will see later in this video, the very reliance on this export-heavy, automotive-centric model has become a vulnerability in a rapidly changing world. But for now, the economic reality is clear. Germany is the beating heart of the European economy, and without the German engine, the entire European project risks stalling. Part 3. The military high-tech powerhouse. Made in Germany now, let's return to the military sphere. Germany's newfound strategic doctrine goes far beyond simply allocating massive budgets for defense. It involves a fundamental shift in how Berlin plans to equip its own forces and project power. German leaders understand that to be taken seriously as a geopolitical actor, a state must possess a cutting-edge military-industrial complex. And in this arena, Germany has a massive head start. Made in Germany has historically been synonymous with precision engineering, durability, and technological superiority. Today, these same hallmarks of German engineering are being applied to advanced weapon systems, land combat vehicles, and naval technology. Let's dive deep into two prime examples of this German military high-tech powerhouse: the Leopard 2 tank and the Class 212 submarine. First, let's talk about the Leopard 2. Widely considered the gold standard of modern main battle tanks, the Leopard 2 represents decades of continuous refinement. Developed by Krauss-Maffei Wegmann, the Leopard 2 seamlessly combines three critical pillars of armored warfare: superior firepower, exceptional armor protection, and high mobility. Consider its technical specifications. It is typically armed with a 120mm smoothbore gun, capable of firing a variety of advanced munitions, including programmable high-explosive rounds and kinetic energy penetrators. The fire control system is so advanced that it allows the tank to engage moving targets with pinpoint accuracy, even while the tank itself is moving over extremely rough terrain. In terms of protection, the Leopard 2 incorporates advanced, multi-layer composite armor, making it incredibly resilient against a wide array of modern anti-tank guided missiles and enemy tank fire. Furthermore, its mobility is exceptional, powered by a massive 1,500 horsepower diesel engine that allows this 60-plus ton behemoth to reach high speeds on and off-road. The Leopard 2 is not just Germany's primary tank. It is the de facto standard tank of the European continent. Because it was adopted by over a dozen European nations, from Poland and Spain to Greece and Sweden, it serves as the backbone of European armored forces. This interoperability gives Germany a massive strategic advantage, as Berlin essentially controls the maintenance, upgrade, and spare part supply chain for the bulk of Europe's heavy armor. When we talk about naval dominance, we have to look underwater. Here, Germany's flagship technology is the Type 212 submarine, constructed by ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems. The Class 212 is widely acknowledged as one of the most advanced and stealthy non-nuclear submarines in the world. What makes the Type 212 a marvel of modern engineering? It utilizes an air-independent propulsion (AIP) system powered by hydrogen fuel cells. Traditional non-nuclear submarines must frequently surface to run their diesel engines and recharge their batteries, making them highly vulnerable to detection by modern anti-submarine warfare aircraft and sonar arrays. The Type 212, however, can remain submerged for weeks at a time, moving silently through the deep ocean without needing to surface for air. Furthermore, the Type 212 is built with a non-magnetic steel hull, making it incredibly difficult for enemy magnetic anomaly detectors to locate. It is armed with heavy torpedoes and advanced anti-ship missiles, allowing it to act as an incredibly quiet, lethal predator in the Baltic Sea, the Mediterranean, and the North Atlantic. By possessing such technologically superior platforms like the Leopard 2 and the Type 212, Germany is not just upgrading its own military. It is building a formidable export machine. German defense contractors are experiencing a historic surge in demand, with companies like Rheinmetall seeing their order backlog skyrocket to tens of billions of euros. Germany is opening new factories, accelerating production lines, and cementing long-term contracts with allies across NATO and beyond. However, this military-industrial boom also presents domestic and international dilemmas. The rapid expansion of arms production raises questions about defense capabilities versus corporate profit margins. Critics argue that the bulk of the money allocated to the military is being absorbed by high production costs and bureaucratic procurement processes, rather than immediately translating into tangible combat readiness. Moreover, for a nation that once championed strict export controls on lethal weapons, the necessity to supply allies and project power in a dangerous world means that Germany must increasingly act as a pragmatic, hard-nosed global arms dealer. Part 4. The Pillars of Clay, pressing challenges despite its immense economic weight, its industrial dominance, and its rapidly modernizing military. Germany's seemingly unstoppable machine rests on incredibly fragile foundations. The path forward for Berlin is fraught with severe domestic and structural challenges that threaten to undermine its newfound power. If we are to decode Germany's future, we must examine the pressing challenges that threaten to derail the German century. The most alarming and structural crisis facing Germany is the demographic time bomb. Like much of the developed world, Germany is facing a rapidly aging population and a shrinking workforce. For decades, the German economic miracle was fueled by a robust, highly skilled domestic workforce that drove innovation and manufacturing excellence. But today, the baby boomer generation is reaching retirement age, and there is simply not enough young, working-age citizens to replace them. This demographic deficit is creating a massive crisis in the labor market. Across Germany, industries are facing acute shortages of skilled labor, from engineers and IT specialists to blue-collar factory workers and tradespeople. Without a sufficiently large workforce, maintaining the staggering levels of productivity that Germany requires to fund its pensions, its infrastructure, and its massive new military budget becomes a mathematical impossibility. While Germany has attempted to offset this decline through targeted immigration and the integration of foreign workers, political polarization and the difficulties of social integration have made this a highly volatile issue. An aging society is also a conservative society, politically speaking, which can lead to resistance against the sweeping reforms and dynamic changes needed to remain competitive in the 21st century. The second major pillar of clay is Germany's energy crisis and its vulnerability in global supply chains. For decades, the German industrial model was based on three fundamental pillars: cheap energy from Russia, cheap subcontractors in Eastern Europe, and steadily growing exports to China. Today, all three of these pillars have either disappeared or been fundamentally compromised. Consider the energy sector. For years, Germany relied heavily on cheap, abundant pipeline natural gas from Russia to power its heavy manufacturing, chemical plants, and automotive factories. The geopolitical rupture and the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines changed everything. Germany was forced to rapidly decouple from Russian energy, scrambling to build liquefied natural gas, LNG, terminals, increase coal usage, and extend the lifespan of its nuclear plants before finally phasing them out. This sudden transition resulted in significantly higher energy costs for German industries. In the highly competitive global market, cheap and reliable energy is a major determinant of profitability. For energy-intensive industries like chemicals, steel, and glass manufacturing, the high cost of energy in Germany compared to the United States or Asia has led to a phenomenon known as deindustrialization. Faced with prohibitive operational costs, major German corporations are choosing to relocate their factories, investments, and supply chains to countries with cheaper energy and lower regulatory burdens. This slow hemorrhage of industrial capacity strikes at the very heart of the German economic model. Furthermore, Germany's reliance on global trade leaves it extremely exposed to the whims of great power competition. For years, China was the ultimate engine of growth for German automakers, with the Chinese market accounting for a massive percentage of sales and profits for brands like Volkswagen and BMW. However, the rapid advancement of domestic Chinese electric vehicle (EV) manufacturers, combined with shifting consumer preferences and rising geopolitical tensions between the West and Beijing, has seen German automakers steadily losing their dominant market share in China. Chinese automakers are now producing high-quality EVs at a fraction of the cost, threatening not only Germany's position in China, but also flooding the European market itself with cheaper alternatives. Add to this the threat of rising global protectionism and trade tariffs. With shifting political administrations in the United States implementing aggressive tariff policies, German exports, particularly automobiles and machinery, face significant barriers at the border. This escalating trade tension directly threatens the export-driven lifeline that built modern Germany, forcing Berlin and Brussels into a difficult balancing act of protecting domestic industries while attempting to maintain global market access. Part 5. The future audience engagement, and outro. As we look toward the horizon of 2026 and beyond, we can see that Germany stands at a dramatic historical crossroads. The silent machine has awakened, but it finds itself walking a tightrope between asserting itself as a global superpower and managing severe domestic decay. The trajectory for Germany's future involves a difficult, often painful, process of reinvention. The old economic model, relying on cheap imported energy, a large, expanding global market for combustion engine cars, and an American security blanket, is dead. To survive and thrive in the coming decades, Berlin must execute a challenging twin transition, digitizing its entrenched bureaucracy, aggressively innovating in the green technology and electric vehicle sectors, and drastically upgrading its digital and physical infrastructure. Militarily, Germany's future is closely intertwined with the fate of the broader European Union. The goal is no longer a unilateral German military, but rather a cohesive, interoperable, and powerful European pillar within NATO. The German defense industry, with its legendary engineering capabilities, will undoubtedly serve as the primary arsenal for the continent. However, translating massive defense budgets into real-world, efficient military capabilities requires overcoming deep-seated bureaucratic inefficiencies and political hesitation. Furthermore, Germany's leadership must navigate the delicate geopolitical tightrope of being a military powerhouse while maintaining the trust of its Eastern European neighbors. Countries like Poland, which border areas of instability, welcome German military support, but remain historically cautious about Berlin holding too much independent military sway. Germany must prove that its new military power is firmly anchored within European and transatlantic alliances, dedicated to collective defense rather than unilateral dominance. This brings us to the ultimate question we must pose to you, our viewers. Can Germany successfully transform itself from a reluctant, pacifist economic giant into a decisive, highly armed geopolitical leader, while simultaneously solving its demographic crisis and rebuilding its industrial base? Or will the weight of its aging population, high energy costs, and fractured supply chains cause the German machine to sputter, dragging the rest of Europe down with it? We want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment down below with your analysis. Do you believe a rearmed and economically dominant Germany is the stabilizing force Europe needs to deter future aggression? Or does it pose new risks to the balance of power on the continent? Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Omni Power, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive into the forces shaping our world. The story of Germany's transformation is just beginning, and its ripple effects will be felt for generations. But as we look at the map of Europe and the shifting centers of power, we are left with one undeniable conclusion. The era of a quiet, unassuming Germany is officially over. But what does this mean for the rest of the major players on the global stage? How will the United States, Russia, and the rising powers of Asia react to a newly militarized and economically desperate Berlin? If you want to understand how the global balance of power is shifting, you need to look at the other side of the Eurasian landmass. In our next video, we're going to dive deep into the Asian pivot, how the rise of the East is shattering the old world order. We will explore the sweeping changes across the Indo-Pacific, the naval arms race, and how Asian economic powerhouses are challenging both American and European supremacy. Click the video appearing on your screen right now to uncover the true driving forces behind the Asian pivot and how it will impact your future. You do not want to miss this explosive breakdown. Click over, and I'll see you there on Omni Power.